Now, the Prime Minister faces an insurgency over Europe, both inside the Conservative Party and from UKIP. The real question for millions of voters is whether they can trust David Cameron to negotiate a transformed relationship within the EU and give Britain a referendum. What exactly are his demands? Are they realistic? And is this, as he says, one last chance for our European future? Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning.
Let's talk largely, if you don't mind today, about Europe, since it is the big issue in front of people's minds at the moment. First of all, can you give me a cast-iron guarantee that a David Cameron-led government will give Britain an in-out referendum within 2 years?
Yes, absolutely. We will hold that referendum by the end of 2017. It will be a referendum on an in-out basis. Do we stay in a reformed European Union or do we leave? And I've said very clearly that whatever the outcome of the next election, and of course I want an overall majority and I'm hoping and believing I can win an overall majority, but people should be in no doubt I will not become Prime Minister unless I can guarantee that we will hold that referendum.
Well, that's very interesting, because if, for instance, the Conservatives were the largest party with a minority, that suggests you would not then be Prime Minister, because you couldn't guarantee that referendum if you didn't have a majority of House of Commons seats.
I couldn't answer the question more clearly. I won't become Prime Minister unless I can guarantee that that in-out referendum will be held. And there's a good reason for
David Cameron won't lead a minority Conservative government after the next election.
I've answered the question.
And looking ahead in your forward diary, kind of Smithson diary, I hope, have you got a date in 2017 when you hope that referendum will take place? Do you know when it's going to happen?
I haven't, but it will be before the end of 2017.
So sometime in the autumn of 2017. It would be very clear that if you have this negotiation and you don't get what you want, you will lead your party into that referendum saying we have to leave Europe, it's no longer worth it.
Well,
you won't sit on the fence.
No, I'm confident that I will achieve the objectives I've set out. And I think the right way to go into a negotiation is with confidence and a positive nature that you can get those changes. And I want to see Britain stay in a reformed European Union.
But we're not going to have a referendum where David Cameron is washing his hands about the result.
No, we'll have a referendum where I'll be recommending, look, I've got these changes. I believe we should stay in this reformed organisation.
I haven't got these changes, because you can't be sure. You can't know. One last, very gentle, very polite go. In that referendum, you will tell people to vote yes or no. You won't sit on the fence.
No, of course I won't sit on the fence.
OK. Will the Cabinet have a free vote, can I ask, in the Conservative Party?
The whole of my government, well, the Conservative half of my government, more than half, the Conservatives in government are all committed to this plan for a renegotiation and a referendum. And we are all convinced that it is possible to achieve these changes. We're going for those changes and we'll act on that basis.
Let's talk about those changes then. You mentioned right at the beginning the importance of getting out of the clause about an ever closer union, which of course in the Treaty of Rome says of peoples. It doesn't say an ever closer union of parliaments or governments. That is the original founding Treaty of Rome, which created the whole thing. Do you really think that you can rip that up and start again? Do you think your colleagues in the European Union will allow that to happen?
Well, I think it's essential that that doesn't apply to Britain, that the treaty is made clear it doesn't apply to Britain. Because I think if you go back, this
you could have an addendum to the Treaty of Rome saying this clause no longer applies to Britain.
Some of the things I'm calling for will require treaty change, and
that would be one of them.
That is one of
on the general principle of the free movement of people, Nigel Farage talking about 400 million people could come here after your job and all the rest of it. You have no proposals to end the free movement of people.
No, I think free movement within the European Union is important, but it needs to be returned to the original concept, which was the freedom to be able to go and work in another country.
So free movement of people would stay after the referendum in the way that you've described it. Let me turn to something else, which is related to that, which is the expansion of the EU, because the borders are always moving east. And Britain has been among the countries, for instance, supporting the accession of Turkey to the EU. Now, you want longer transitional controls, but as the name suggests, they are just transitional controls. So David Cameron could negotiate this deal successfully, have a successful referendum, and then a few years down the line we could have everybody currently working in Turkey free to come and work here.
Well, I've argued very clearly that we need longer transitional controls, and possibly transitional controls agreed on a totally different basis. It is important for people to understand, of course, elections are an opportunity to register a message or a protest, but we are looking at sending men and women to the European Parliament to stand up for this country. And that's why I want people to send Conservatives there. Now, but I want to make sure that...
You mentioned a new parliamentary veto, so I'm running through the list.
Sure.
A new parliamentary veto, that would apply to all parliaments, able to veto any European Commission proposals?
What this is what's known as the red card system, where European national parliaments can club together and say about a particular new proposal, we don't want that.
So the British Parliament still have to get support from the Bundestag or the French Parliament, or whatever, the National Assembly.
National parliaments working together. And we'll have to work out the exact numbers that will be required in order to block new proposals.
I think there will be a lot of people watching this who will say, yes, OK, well, let him have a go. Let him try and negotiate all of that. But in the meantime, I need to keep my foot, as it were, on the Prime Minister's neck. I need to vote UKIP purely to put pressure on him. That is a completely logical and reasonable thing to do, isn't it?
Well, it isn't, because what we need in Europe is a strong Conservative Prime Minister, backed by a team of strong Conservative MEPs, members of the European Parliament in Brussels and Strasbourg, that then will be taken seriously by our European partners.
If you decided that the Pfizer bid for AstraZeneca was not in the interests of this country, could you stop it?
Well, first of all, I would speak out very clearly. I mean, I think the right thing to do is to engage early on, get stuck in with these companies, as I've done and my team of ministers have done, to make sure we get good guarantees and the best deal for Britain.
Which you haven't yet.
Well, I think we made some very good progress. I mean, I think, frankly, Andrew, it's been instructive how different politicians have reacted. As soon as I heard this was happening, I asked the Cabinet Secretary, other ministers, to engage with AstraZeneca and to engage with Pfizer. And the list of things Pfizer have already said they would do.
You engaged more closely with Pfizer.
Absolutely.
And includes some ex-friends of yours who are working for Pfizer than with AstraZeneca.
That's not the case. Ministers were talking to AstraZeneca before anyone spoke to Pfizer, so that is not the case.
Okay.
But, you know, look, don't underestimate the power of some of the things they've already said about making sure, for instance, 20% of their R&D jobs will be here in the UK.
You remember what
Now, I
Kraft
want more.
said
Absolutely,
before
I want
Cadbury.
more. But it's very interesting, isn't it, that the Labour leader's reaction on being asked to engage with Pfizer was to say, no, I'm too busy, because he wanted, very important this, he wanted to stand on the sidelines and make a series of point-scoring political points rather than engaging in the national interest.
He's against the bid, and a lot of people looking at Pfizer's record will say, and a good thing too, they are a praying mantis. They will dismantle this company, which is very, very important to Britain. As Prime Minister, you ought to be able to stop it. You can't stop it because you haven't got a public interest defence at the moment. Can you put one in? Why not put one in?
Well, we are looking, the Business Secretary said specifically he's looking at this issue of public interest defence, and he will report back to Parliament on that.
But it is open-minded to toughening up the law on this?
I will do whatever is right for Britain. I will always stand up for British jobs, British interests, British science, British R&D.